Welcome back to another episode of the Snap Count. I'm Emilio Calderon, and I am joined by the former head NIL coordinator for the University of Alabama football. His name is Caleb Catlin. If you were an NCAA athlete right now, Caleb, who would you most want to have an NIL deal with?
Repeat that question. I got a little choppy. If I was an NCAA person and I was
Uh,
giving out an
who would
NIL
you most
deal,
want to have an NIL deal with?
oh, dude, fucking, I think it's Ryan Williams, the Alabama wide receiver. Did you see that? After that Alabama Georgia game, he changed his Instagram profile picture to Mike Vick with a dog.
I did see that. It's
I
just
was like, give that man a bag right now. Best receiver in the country, and he's 17. That's freaking awesome.
That's not the route I thought you were going to go because I was asking you who you'd like to have a deal with, but actually that was kind of was a good
Oh,
answer. Kind of was a
oh,
good answer.
and well,
That's
that'll
fine.
do too.
All right, let's get into it. Like usual, we're going to go in order. We're going to start with Thursday Night Football, which this week was kind of interesting, but kind of went how we would have expected. It was a NFC East showdown. The Cowboys went into MetLife and beat the Giants 20-15. I only wrote down two things for this game. I wrote the Cowboys have to hope to God that Jayden Daniels isn't for real. News from this game for them is Micah Parsons did suffer a high ankle sprain. I didn't check their schedule, so I don't know who they play the next 2 to 4 weeks. That is something to monitor. And then for the Giants, I similarly wrote, hope to God that Malik Neighbors has a non threatening illness so the front office can remember how bad Daniel Jones is.
Yeah,
Because
it was.
we said this last week that he is doing a fine job of preventing Daniel Jones from being a regional spokesperson for some form of New York insurance, car sales, anything of the
He's
sort.
also he's also so desperate enough to where Malik Neighbors might fuck around and die out there with the kind of throws he's giving at him. It's nasty.
Yeah, I mean, which I do love because Neighbors is I'm willing to say it's only been 4 weeks. You know, these are rookies we're talking about in very different situations. I think he has been by far the best offensive rookie. He's probably the rookie of the year so far, actually, including defense. Like Marvin Harrison, funny situation. He's had moments, obviously that big game against the Rams in Arizona. But yeah, I think Neighbors has been by far and away the best rookie offense or defense. And it is quite unfortunate, I guess, if you're a Giants fan that uh, the takeaway for this for the front office is, oh, Daniel Jones is actually our starting quarterback.
Well, listen, we can go Drew Lock territory at any time. So
This is a pro Drew Lock pod, as people know. Yeah, that's all I have for that game. Moving on to another. Moving to Sunday, this was a funny game of which I had somewhat similar sentiment. Uh, Colts 27, Steelers 24. That is the Steelers' first loss of the season. Did you have anything for this one?
Um, I put a link to Jim Ross when he was on the Dark Side of the Ring. When he was like, "Sit your ass down, go to sleep, give us all a break." I put that and then just put Anthony Richardson's name right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
the weird. It's Joe Flacco time. We're gonna see the Colts. You know, dig into hopefully playoff contention. Given how good Joe Flacco was last year, I mean, it's not that big of a gap. I think they'll be great. Hopefully, Anthony Richardson will learn how to throw a normal pass in the meantime, just by
Yeah,
watching footage.
yeah. I wrote the Colts will live and die by their two quarterback options, and obviously it's a death by sword with Richardson or death by boredom with Flacco, which is and that's a real pick your poison situation, which we both agree that in the bigger picture that it's better for Richardson to really just take this seat. Again, I really couldn't find any instance of this happening to a young quarterback where they just pull the reins back like you're still the guy, but we think you need to do this or this, which is obviously how we feel. But I think based on how the game went with Flacco, it's very clear they have the weapons to win either way.
Yeah.
Josh Downs had a pretty good game. Eight catches on 9 targets. He had 82 yards and a touchdown. Michael Pittman had his best game of the season by far. He had six
Hmm.
catches on 9 targets, 113 yards. I had some really good next gen stats for him. Actually, he got 5 of 7 targets past the sticks for 111 yards. And compared to the first 3 games of the season, he had less than 5 catches and 40 yards in all 3 games. So this was a good game for him. And yeah, Colts are. It's a funny situation to be in. I don't want to say it's good or bad. It's very funny, is what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's super. Again, they sort of strike me how they were last year. Needed a pretty safe quarterback, which is why
Mhm.
they got Gardner Minshew, and defense is still pretty solid. Still got the weapons. They really, it was just all, you know, based on whether or not Anthony Richardson would be great right away. And I mean, he was throwing up hospital balls, so that's why Michael Pittman wasn't getting immediately into the flow of things.
On the Steelers side, just building on my Justin Fields propaganda that I've been pushing for several weeks now, but he actually did have a really great game. This was definitely the best game he's played in a Steelers uniform. He went 22 for 34, 312 yards and a touchdown. And on the ground, he rushed 10 times for 55 yards and 2 touchdowns, which they really needed because Najee Harris did not have a good game at all. He
Yeah.
had 13 rushes on and only got 19 yards. Yeah, so they really needed Fields to be great just to be competitive in this game. And like I've said, I think this game is enough evidence for me, and I hope it's enough evidence for other people that you'll see that Fields clearly is the better option over Wilson whenever Wilson gets healthy.
Dolphins country, let's swim.
Oh God, I was hoping I could ignore this possibility. I'm sorry, Miami Dolphins fans, if you had to hear that. Very sorry.
I need that.
All right. This was a really crazy game that I actually don't have a lot to say about. I think you know what I'm talking about. But the Minnesota Vikings, who are now 4-0, marched into Lambeau and won 31-29. This was a strange, bizarre game. Absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, I got one sentence jotted down because I was just watching in sort of awe that the fact that they were like so tightly wound. I was like, dude, Green Bay almost took that shit back,
Yeah.
and that like it just was as simple as that. Like both of them are. I came away looking at both of them like, wow, like the Lions, got all good just to run into a fucking bloodbath.
Yeah, both of us were very high on the Lions. I'll put my hand up. Especially, I was very high on the Lions. I thought they were the second best team in this league leading up from the preseason. But yeah, this division is disgusting in a good way. To be clear, this division is gonna get real nasty real quick.
Yeah, and I mean, like, let's not get it fucked up. Like, the Lions are still great, and they're number
Yes, yes,
one,
yeah.
and like, they're probably the best team in any other division except this one.
Except this one, yeah. The stats here paint a very strange story. Sam Darnold had another great game. 20 for 28, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did get picked off once, and I'd like to toot my own horn here and say it was by Xavier McKinney, who's been really great for this Packers defense. On the Green Bay side, really weird. So I'm going to start by pointing out Malik Willis's passing stats from weeks 2 and 3 combined. Like combined, this is 2 full games, mind you. 25 for 34, 324 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Very efficient, very good. Jordan Love in this game alone, 32 for 54 on pass attempts, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. This game was legitimately bonkers. If
that's
you
got
rewatch a game from this week, please make it this one. This game is insane.
that's got to feel really demoralizing for Malik Willis, where he's just like looking at Jordan Love, just like let the ball fling around like that, and he's like, "Damn, he threw more than me in one fucking game."
Yeah, I was very surprised by how this game went. For context, the Packers did open up a gigantic 28. They went into the half up 28-7. So the Packers are playing from behind the 8 ball. But I was just surprised, because with his injury in those 2 weeks and Willis being obviously more limited as a passer specifically, I was just surprised that we didn't see Matt LaFleur try to incorporate more of that like creative run game stuff. Like again, I know it's a situational thing. You're playing from way behind, but I don't know. They really. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be so negative because they did almost pull it back, but it did feel like a sort of the Vikings were not in that second half at all,
Yeah.
and the Packers were really just heaving it up, like quite literally heaving it up. Um, I do have one insane, more than the Jordan Love passing stat line. You won't believe what I'm going to tell you right now. Sam Darnold, yes, Sam Darnold, who again, this is a very pro Sam Darnold pod. Sam Darnold is the first quarterback to win and have 2 or more passing touchdowns in each of his first 4 career starts for a team in the Super Bowl era.
Wait, the first period?
For first 4 starts for any team in the Super
What
Bowl
the
era. Isn't that incredible?
what? That's
Like, what do you
nuts.
think about that? Like, Peyton Manning did not, like, when you think about anybody
Paid
who's
man.
even moved, Peyton Manning didn't do that in Denver. Brady didn't do that in Tampa Bay. Sam Darnold in Minnesota. What a time.
JJ McCarthy, it's looking quiet.
Mm, it is funny because I don't want to dwell on this, but it's very clear that I don't want to ramble. I guess I should leave it. But the most I'll say is Sam Darnold is going to get paid, and is it going to be by Minnesota or not? We will see. We will see. This was a really interesting game. Uh, this was also really fascinating to watch. The Saints narrowly lose to the Falcons, 26-24. I'll let you start. What were your big takeaways from this one?
The Falcons scored 0 touchdowns on offense. Like they still won the fucking game. Like it the like 5 minutes into the game, the Falcons punt away the ball, and the same Shaheed just like
Rashid Shaheed, totally.
he fumbles the ball, and then the Falcons get a touchdown off of that. That let me know what
This
kind of game
that
I was getting myself into.
I love Shaheed. He's one of the most exciting players in the league. But yeah, for anybody who didn't see this clip, what's the Falcon? Yeah, Bradley Pinero puts a really great punt like on the 3rd-yard line, but oddly, Shaheed calls for a fair catch, even though he's
Yeah.
not being immediately pressured. Like usually, that's like you let that bounce really, and if it bounces inside the 10, it is what it is.
Mhm.
But he calls a fair catch, and he's clearly not under it, and he muffs it, and it goes off his chest into the end zone. Yeah, that's how I knew I was in for another game.
Other than that, two pretty flat points. Conservative check down Carr is back in full effect. We're not seeing those real balls he throws in those first 2 games. Um, and I wanted to float an idea that might seem a little crazy. I think I like Darnell Mooney more than I like Drake London.
Ooh, wow. That is an insane thing. Wow.
There's some yards after catch stuff that I think Mooney does a lot better than Drake London, to be honest. I think there might be like some very little like route running stuff that Drake London might be better at, but in terms of like, going up 50-50 and in terms of the yards after catch stuff, I think Mooney might be a little better than Drake
Well,
London.
I understand what you're saying. I think the correct way to put that is maybe the Falcons are not getting the most out of Drake London, and whether that's him or the scheme so far, I think is a question to ask. Because I mean, Drake London, I think of as like a catch point guy, which
Yeah.
is, I guess, is part of not quite the problem with this Falcons offense, which has been good, but given the talent, including at quarterback, which is, they have the best quarterback they've had in 3 years.
Yeah.
Like that is, I know the Falcons are so weird to me because I don't want to be a hater on the Falcons, but when I look at Rodgers and the Jets, I can see they are. We'll get to the Jets later, but or I guess this is it here. But when I see how Rodgers is operating in the Jets offense, yeah, a lot of quick game because again, we're talking about a very old quarterback with an Achilles injury. Um, I don't know. And then the Falcons, Cousins under Kevin O'Connell, his bread and butter was a lot of play action stuff,
Yeah,
but it's and a lot of under center stuff. But it's very clear that with the injury, he's not comfortable doing that, and so they're
yeah,
trying to figure out how to get him to be comfortable, operating out of shotgun or yeah, I don't know. The Falcons are so weird because I think they could still figure it out and be a
yeah.
really great potentially top 10 offense, but I just don't have a lot of faith.
Yeah, I mean, what I thought was encouraging, and this is coming from somebody who hates Kirk Cousins more than most people,
Mm.
um, that I do see that he's really like huffing the ball. At least in this game, he's really slinging the ball real far. So it's not really a concern of like, oh, because he doesn't have a steady base, he's like kind of wimping the throws. No, he's very top heavy, so he's able to get the ball down the field. He's just not very comfortable moving around. So I mean, for what it's worth, like that is a little bit encouraging on an Atlanta side of things.
Yeah, I did have some stats for Cousins per next gen. Nearly all of Kirk Cousins' passing production came when the Saints did not blitz, and that accounted for 208 of his 238 total passing yards. And so Cousins averaged 8.7 yards per attempt against four or fewer pass rushers compared to 2.7 against the blitz. And so, yeah, it's like stuff like this where, again, the Falcons are clearly a good offense. But when you read stuff like this, and then
I'm more
again,
surprised.
I'm not a Falcons hater. I'm not trying to be, but it's just based on expectation. Just I just don't have a lot of faith that this is the kind of team that will go into the playoffs in a high pressure situation, regardless of the defense. But especially when I bring up those stats, especially when you think of a team like, the expectations for this team are very high, not just from their fans, but from a lot of people. And so I can't imagine them beating a lot of good defenses the way this offense is operating right now.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, that Saints secondary was a little iffy, aside from one person who we'll get to later on. But the Saints secondary was a little sleepy throughout the game in a way that was
Yeah.
very glaring.
All right. Moving on to a team that also has a very old quarterback who has not. I feel like I was about to invoke some evil. I'm just going to say a guy who has had injury issues and currently does not have them. Matthew Stafford and the Rams. This was a tough game for them. They lost out to the Bears, 24-18. I don't have a lot for this one. I just have some. I have some boring stats for you. Caleb Williams was 15 for 15 on passes under 15 air yards against the Rams. And then DeAndre Swift, who
Huge
very
game for him.
visibly this past week, yeah, was getting a lot of flack from the media. He had 93 yards on 16 attempts. Um, the Bears remembered how to play football, I guess. Um, because
Sort
I
of.
forget if that was last week or week two where Caleb threw like 50 passes, which I thought was absolutely like absurd.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean that really wasn't my takeaway here. I really thought that offense was more bizarre than anything because I think he had like 70 pass catching yards, and then he had like 90
oh,
on the
DeAndre
run
Swift, yes,
game,
he had 7 catches for 72 yards as well. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to add that.
which feels really damning considering that you've got all these weapons that you just don't. It's
Does
again
it
you.
though? I don't know.
I don't
Like,
know.
I don't.
You've got a,
I get what you're saying.
if you've got a Dunze and you've got more, you should be willing. You should be more comfortable airing the thing out. But it seems like the most success that they're having is getting these little flats where Swift will run after the catch.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're gonna have this conversation so many times, or some form of this conversation's been had a lot the first 4 weeks of the season. Like, I don't know what this season in particular, you've probably seen the running meme, whether just by random Instagram commenters who you should never listen to be clear, but just in general, the people calling quarterbacks check down merchants. But that's what the league that I'm not endorsing it to be clear, but it's where the league is right now, man. I think a lot of discussion about quarterbacks in the league not being as good as we think they are, which I think is valid. The flip side of that is like, I don't know, man, these defenses are really good. And I think it's very clear the best offensive coordinators, specifically in the league right now, are very good because they're able to diversify their games versus, and I'm not saying Shane Waldron can't be one of these guys. I think he's in a weird situation as much as the players on this Bears offense, but the Bears offense is figuring itself out. And so they don't even know yet if they are a deep ball team, like an explosive team, or if they are one of these just check down teams. But I don't know. I see a game like this as a positive, especially given how rough Caleb's first 3 weeks have been. Like especially that game. I forget again. I remember if it was last week or 2 weeks ago against the Colts where he threw like 52 pass attempts, and it was like that is unacceptable. Like that is like Jordan Love doing that when he's down 3 possessions. That's different. But when you're asking your rookie quarterback who you're still developing to like you expect him to put the team on his back, like I don't care if he's the first overall pick. You know what I mean? Just I don't know. That feels like really lazy coaching. Like I literally do not care how talented you think the guy is. Like that just feels like poor coaching to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even think it's just a quarterback thing, more so than it's like we've got all this personnel for you to use it, and you're, sort of settling in a check down situation, which I don't know. It just feels weird on an offensive side of things. Their defense was really what stood out to me this game. Just, you know, I don't know, good stuff all around there. The sky's the limit if they are able to click on offense. Uh, Really, my main takeaway is I hope whoever has Tutu Atwell on fantasy is having a good day.
Yeah, the Rams. Even though they lost this game, the young guys are have continued to look very promising for them. Yeah, Tutu Atwell in the absence of Puka Nacua and Cooper Cup has been really great. This game he had 4 catches on 6 targets, 82 yards. He only had 9 yards after the catch.
Yeah.
How tall? How tall is Tutu Atwell again? You would
Oh,
really expect a guy of his size to be one of those. He only had 9 yards after the catch. You googling
no,
this right
okay.
now?
He's 5'9". What
Five
the
nine receiver
fuck?
only getting 9 yards after the catch. It's kind of awesome.
That's
um,
nuts.
yeah, these young guys they've drafted. Like I've said this before, Les Snead and Sean McVay drafting these guys in day 2 and 3. Jordan Whittington, who they drafted this year, 6 catches on 8 targets, 62 yards. Colby Parkinson, 4 catches on 7 targets. He had 33 yards. 28 of them came after the catch. Like, really find these guys, man. Jesus.
No, I'm like actively uncomfortable the more you name these fake people right now.
um, on the topic of Rams drafting, defense did look pretty good, or at least the defensive line looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Jared Verse had 5 pressures. 4 of them came in under 2.5 seconds, which is the most quick pressures in the game by a rookie this season.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Rams are a weird team that are not performing up to our expectations, but I think will continue to be competitive in that division, at least. Speaking of a team not performing up to expectation, we had a repeat of a playoff game last year, and it ended kind of how some people would have expected with the Buccaneers bouncing back from their Week 3 loss in Denver. They handled, and I would like to emphasize, they handled the Eagles 33-16.
Yeah.
Where would you like to start with this one?
Really, I was just kind of marveling at Baker Mayfield. It sounds like a weird sentence. I won't lie to you, but I was marveling at Baker Mayfield and his decision making. I wish I had like hard numbers to really emphasize, but I was just watching how quickly they jumped into plays. Like he wouldn't stay in the pocket very long. They would get these plays off immediately, and the Eagles secondary suffered through a lot of it.
Yeah, it's growing increasingly clear that this Eagles secondary is not good. I'm sorry to say that they are not very good. I
Yeah,
don't
and
have any
they're
more
not.
cutting analysis, truthfully. CJ is oh god, yeah, CJ Gardner Johnson. I don't like to talk about NFL players like this, especially in the setting we have, but he's kind of like he's been easy money for teams passing the ball downfield the first 4 weeks of the season. It has
Huge
not been
Patrick
good for them.
Beverly energy.
but like specifically Patrick Beverley after the age of 30. like
Yeah,
not like not at all any point when Patrick Beverley was actually like a top 10-ish defender.
yeah, no, this is more Patrick Beverly when he tells Steph Curry the next 5 years are mine. Like that's the energy that I get from CJ Gardner.
I think it's even specifically when Beverly told Steph Curry that, but we're on like year 4 of it even. Like we're not even at the beginning of that. We're already in the middle of like, so that thing you said a few years ago.
Then we're almost in Israel territory. That's what you said. Bro,
um
finna kill the
yeah,
XFL.
yeah, the Eagles. I do want to point out the biggest thing from this game was they did not have Lane Johnson at right
Hmm.
tackle. Fred Johnson, ironically, took over for him, and it was his first start since 2021. It was not very good. He allowed a
Yeah,
team high 9 pressures and a sack. Um,
yeah,
I have a really good stat for Lane Johnson here. Without him on the field this season, the Eagles have allowed a 43.5% pressure rate on 69 dropbacks. 43.5.
yeah.
And
It's
with
fitting.
uh,
It's fitting how bad Hurts is like shrunk underneath any type of blitz coverage ever since somebody like Johnson's out.
um, I don't know. This Eagles team is so weird. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they allowed 105 yards after missed tackles. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't know.
Rashad White was running all over there.
Yeah, I don't know. Nick Sirianni. I think you need to start looking at Indeed.com, my friend. I'm sorry.
He about to start talking with Bill Simmons real quick.
Honestly, like no joke, he'd be really great on the ringer. He'd probably be better on the ringer than he is at this. With all due respect.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's not like Garrett, who's on Fox, and they have to ask him for genuine analysis and shit.
Yeah, like I think at least Nick Sirianni could be funny in the sense that I feel good. I could laugh with him. I could also laugh at him. And Jason Garrett is like, why are you here, man?
That dude, it's kind of sad. Like, even the high school coaches was like, I don't really know if he gonna set up my offense like that.
um, yeah, Philadelphia Eagles fans, I'm very sorry for how your season is going because I thought it'd be better than this too.
I didn't. I don't know. I kind of imagine a whole lot of 9-8s across the board for Philly and Dallas. So this is kind of going how I
Yeah, but
expected
you
it.
like you
What
like like
what
four you like
what what I did not expect was the commies to go up there
oh
and
we'll
take their
get to them.
spot.
Yeah, we'll get to them. Yeah. I'll say your thing is you hate like every team in the league except for like 4. So
I mean, nah, I don't think that's fair. I just hate people
okay,
who
fine,
like.
like 6. Sorry.
I, I don't like teams that like masquerade as like good. I think it's the other thing. Hate's a strong word.
Hate is a strong word. Like I said this last week, man. I want to move on from the Eagles, but I said this last week. Nick Sirianni is still employed by the Philadelphia Eagles. Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen are not. That's all I'm saying. It's very yeah. That's all I'm saying. I don't. I'll leave it there. That's all I'm saying. All right. 2 games that I like to keep short. I don't have a lot for these guys. Cincinnati Bengals and the Carolina Panthers. Bengals pulled this one out and finally pulled themselves out of early season. Zach Taylor's favorite place, early season hell. They won this game 34-24. Uh, I think I texted you this. It was simply the Bengals simply remembered who they are. The Panthers also
That
remembered who they are.
are we sure that the Bengals remembered who they are? I mean, that was really just like all I had said for this. I didn't even look at the stats or anything. I was like, they need to beat a team that actually matters before I say
Yes.
anything of value.
Well,
And
I
I hate to
mean,
say that about the poor Panthers, considering they got Andy Dalton out there now, who's making things shake a little more. But like, at the end of the day, like it's not. It doesn't like truly matter what they're doing.
see, you do hate every team in the league except for like 4, which is like,
Maybe,
which is yeah, I get it.
maybe.
But for me, I think based on Panthers. It might have just been a Dalton replacing Bryce Young honeymoon. He still looked good for what it was worth. I think I didn't write down his stats, but I think he went some. He ballpark was like 25 for 40 and like 240 yards. Still had a
Yeah,
pretty good game
pretty
against a
solid.
solid Bengals defense. But my big takeaway from this was Amarius Mims finally started his first game for the Bengals, and they allowed only 5 pressures on 32 dropbacks, which is the lowest pressure rate they've allowed since, I wrote this down, week 5 of 2022. So again, granted, not against a very good pass rush, but still, I'm applying the you have to beat who's in front of you thing, and especially for the Bengals being 0-3, like they needed this win as much as the Panthers did, or they needed this even more than the Panthers did.
Yeah,
And also, sorry, I had one more. Chase Brown actually had a really good game. He had 80 yards on 15 carries and 2 touchdowns, even though he only played at 42% of offensive snaps, which is kind of crazy. That's real Bryce Huff vibes. I'm so sorry, Eagles fan. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to go back to the well there. The limited sample size king. I'm so sorry, Eagles fans. He did get his first tackle of the season, though, against Tampa Bay. Bryce Huff. He got his first tackle of the season. I'm going to stop bullying the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm sorry. I said I would not give you the floor here, but I want to go very short on this game, and you know what game this is. We'll probably go down as the worst game of the season. I feel very comfortable saying this. The Broncos won 10-9 away in MetLife against the Jets. Do you actually have anything to say about this game? If so, please. If not,
Bo Nix had negative yards in the first half. How the fuck do you do that? Not even just negative yards. You know, this could be on like 7 passes. This motherfucker had 20 pass attempts and had negative yards. How do you do that? But whatever. That
he ended 12 for 25 with 60 yards
that
in
feels
one touchdown.
impossible.
Shout out to Cortland Sutton, because my God, there is no reason I should have to care at all about Russell Wilson or Bo Nix, and yet
That feels impossible. I put a question mark around, is it Tyrod Taylor time? Rogers looked quite beat up towards the end. He was limping real bad. So it might be Tyrod Taylor time, which is good as somebody who still
um
has stocks there.
staying on offense, I did have a. I appreciate. I was looking for a stat so I could validate, not validate. I think I hate Nathaniel Hackett no matter what. But and friendly reminder that the Broncos offensive coordinator is Joe Lombardi. But
Yeah.
this is from another next gen stat. The league wide motion rate in 2024 so far is the highest it's been in any season since 2018. Teams are using motion 63.5% of the time. That's that's not necessarily they're finding the guy in motion, but they're motioning people before the play. The Broncos and the Jets are both bottom 5 in motion rate this year.
Makes sense.
Broncos are actually rock bottom. They only do it 33% of the time, and the Jets are
Yeah,
at least a little bit closer. They're at 49%. They're 28th in the league. But I think this is one of those things where I talked about when we were talking about the Bears, talked about the check down or taking the safe yards, which I think is unfortunately that's just how the league is right now. You have to take what's in front of you, and then but when I look at these teams, it's like you guys aren't even doing anything.
right.
Like
And I
why?
mean that
It's
It's making Garrett Wilson look real bad, and it I don't know. The worst thing that I could say is that this is the kind of game that happens when you have Trey Songz in attendance.
Look, I'm making a league wide plea to all all not fantasy football watchers. Regardless if you consider yourself casual or dedicated, you watch just your team or other teams. Look, man, we got Matt Canada out of here. Can we be consistent? We need to get more of these guys out of here. They are doing evil things to this league. Joe Lombardi should not be an offensive coordinator. I'm sorry. I'd watch Joe Lombardi offenses for 2 years. Should not be calling offenses in this league. I am
It
sorry.
it feels impossible, but like it sort of just feels like a placeholder for whatever the hell Aaron Rodgers wants to do, which might be a little unfair, but like I don't know, it
I
seems
would
a
like
bit
to point out
obvious.
that Nathaniel Hackett is 100% Aaron Rodgers' fault, so he's not totally innocent here. There's actually one positive in this game, other than a Broncos win, which I don't view as a positive. Sorry. Um, Will McDonald was actually really great in this game. He had 4 pressures on 18 pass rushes. It's his third straight game with 4+ pressures. I should have wrote this down. I think he's now third or fourth in the league with like 17 pressures. And that's behind, we're talking about he's right behind Parsons. I know Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson are both up there. So you're at least. Um, yeah, that was a lot longer than I wanted to talk about this game. Big takeaway is Joe Lombardi and Nathaniel Hackett should not be coaching in the NFL.
Yes.
All right. Wow, we got a lot of hating off our chests. Let's talk about a team. Emphasis on team that we like. Actually, this was actually an exciting game that that really went down to the wire. Uh, in the AFC South, Texans pulled out a really important, really scrappy, but really good 24-20 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. I just want to start with pointing out, because they're not my shoutouts, but I want to give them their flowers while they're here. I just mentioned them. Daniil Hunter's got 20 pressures on 138 snaps. That's 22% rate. Will Anderson's got 19 on 127 snaps. That's 22.9% rate. And yes, they do both lead the league right now.
That's sick.
Yes, where would you like to go with this one?
Um, so I mean, sure, we could both talk about the Bobby Slowick sort of thing with Houston.
Oh,
What I wanted to what I paid attention to was the Jaguars, considering that they are probably the team that I dislike the most. Um, I want to note towards the end of the game, there was a couple possessions in that Jaguars drive where they end up with a field goal, and it's like 4.5 minutes left, and instead of favoring ETN and trying to chew some clock so that CJ Stroud doesn't have a lot of time left, they opt for like these really shitty pass plays with Trevor Lawrence on second and third down, and they don't move anywhere, and they end up in like I want to say a 4th and 8 situation. And it leaves Stroud with 3 minutes where he ends up smoking them in the final drive. And that just felt really damning on whatever the hell that the Jaguars are doing within their schemes.
the Jaguars might be rivaling the Eagles for the most poorly coached team in the league. I think
I mean,
so. I think they're both
it's
like
a
top three. I think, yeah. Which I actually, not to be biased, I do feel a little bit bad saying about Doug Peterson, but I think it's very clear now that his charm of sorts has worn off. Whether that's like a locker room thing, but also, frankly, just what you were seeing on the field from a
yeah,
coaching perspective. Like, yeah, poor clock management. Um, I think Jaguars are funny because I thought they'd be decent. I thought they'd be a competitive. I didn't think they would like blow the doors off it all this year, but when we were ranking teams in the preseason, I thought there was no way they could be as bad as they were second half of last season, and they're even worse.
yeah.
This doesn't make sense to me.
For what it's worth, to your Eagles point, at this rate, Nick Sirianni is going to be the next Jacksonville coach.
That is disturbing. Dear God, that is disturbing.
I mean, that's just what the pattern suggests.
Like I will just say this: you hate Jalen Hurts because he's coached by Nick Sirianni. What are you going to think about Trevor Lawrence if he's coached by Nick Sirianni? Jesus Christ, dude.
I mean, listen, Trevor Lawrence killed Alabama back in college, so I'm pretty neutral on whether or not he succeeds.
Yeah, I don't know. This Jacks team is so weird because Lawrence should be better. So should the
Mm-hmm.
coaching. So should the defense. Because yeah, this defense still just so has been
It's
really poor.
bad, really
Like
bad.
they really outside Josh Hines Allen, he's been so good that people aren't paying enough attention to how bad their defense. Like without him, they're a bottom three defense. Legitimately,
Yeah.
they're actually so poor without him because they still insist on having Trevon Walker as a pass rusher when he's clearly not a good pass rusher. He's definitely an interior guy. Like I don't know, there's just like very basic things with this team. Like they don't tackle well. You know, the offense doesn't manage well. Not just like situationally, they do not build drives well. Like I don't know, this team, but
Ever since watching football, I've never understood the concept of not being able to tackle well, but that's legitimately a concern for some of these teams is that they can't fucking tackle. It feels impossible.
I don't know. Oh, you did bring up Bobby Sloak, and I did want to bring up this conversation. I don't have like a lot to say about it, but I don't think this was updated for week 4, but at least leading up to week 3, the Texans were 31st in offensive EPA per rush. Like, and I know so Slowick, you know, he comes from the Shanahan tree, so I get it. He real big established the run guy, but I don't know, man. I feel like I've said
But
this almost every week. It's just you don't have
that's
to
not
do
what
this to yourself, man. You don't have to do this
that's
to yourself.
I mean, this is just like a. I feel like they're like going against the grain of where the league wants to go anyway. I mean, the way that these teams are built, the most success that the Texans ever had last season and this season is when they're shredding apart the secondaries. And instead you're gonna, really try and establish the run, quote unquote. But I'm just like, that's the antithesis of play. Like, sure, you're gonna need Mixon to have that a little bit just to have some variation, but your bread and butter is within those play action situations and within those times where CJ Stroud's going over the top to Nico Collins or Tank Dell on a streak or Diggs on a route. Like that, I don't know. That's how you built the team. You've got all these options for him to throw, and you're just like, yeah, but I don't know who the fuck they're having play instead of Joe Mixon right now, but
It
a whole
was
bunch of guys
yeah.
that are
On
just
Sunday it was
fine.
Cam Akers and Dore Ogunbowale. Who Akers was actually fairly good. He had
Uh,
15. He had 53 yards and 15 rushes, but
I mean, if your OC emphasizes that much running, I'd hope Cam Akers had a good game.
yeah, I don't know. Going into the season, I didn't have concerns about this offense, and I it's not that I'm concerned about this offense because it's objectively going to end up as a top 10 offense. My concern is more when they get to the playoffs, I think they're going to be very susceptible to hitting that wall. And, you know, in this league, you hit the wall in the first half, and I know they haven't been great so far this season, but when you hit the wall against a team like the Chiefs, are I don't know why I cannot think right now, but
I mean,
when you come
the
up against a good
Vikings.
offense, yeah, like yeah,
Whenever they
when
face
you
it,
come up against a team like the Vikings or even like the Jets, who even though their offense, but like when you look at their defense, like yeah, when you
if
come
you
up against those guys, and then if you have to play from behind, if it's even just a possession, then you're really putting yourself behind the eight ball.
yeah, I mean, even in that Bears game, like you saw it a little bit, where the Bears are putting a lot of pressure on Stroud. Whenever the Texans face like at least a great defense, it seems like
Mm.
they shrink a little bit because they're super stern on how they want to, establish the run and get into their sets. It feels very progressive when in reality you kind of need to at least set the marker with something a bit more explosive, considering you've got like five guys you're able to do that with.
I think maybe after the Vikings game, what happened to them is they didn't want to. Obviously, we're talking about a professional football team. They didn't want to accept that. Oh, the Vikings just shredded us, and
Hmm.
maybe at least for this game, the takeaway was maybe let's not risk putting the defense out there more than we need to by trying to hit these big plays, and that's why they're so insistent on the run game. Which I brought the you know I brought this up to you last year, and you were kind of fine with it. But yeah, I don't know. It's again, I get what Bobby Slowick is trying to do. Again, like the Shanahan stuff, like this stretch boot stuff. But I don't know. Maybe
I mean, if if
I have
if
a really raw thought I'd like to share. This
If that's where their lies is within trying to be like, all right, let's slowly and patiently, get our way throughout the field. If they plan on being that methodical, they needed to build that running back room a lot more.
more better.
Yeah, you're gonna want like a Saquon Barkley over a Joe
I
Mixon,
was that was what I was just about to say. Yeah.
and instead of going, like, oh, I'm gonna pick up Diggs. Like when you pick up somebody like Diggs, and when you focus on that wide receiver room, it suggests that you feel comfortable being able to air it out with the best of them. But if you insist on establishing the runs, you can't just have like a pack of four dudes like the Chargers.
For what it's worth, again, I think this Texans offense will be fine. They will end the season as a top 10 offense. I'll be shocked if they don't. But
It's really more of a worry again because we see them as a potentially elite team. It gets a little concerning when you see them up against other elite teams.
all right, moving on to all right. Sorry, I had an order here. I'm just gonna get some real short games out of the way. The AFC West match here. The Chiefs go into SoFi and they beat the Chargers 17-10. I don't really have anything for this game. Again, given Chargers injuries that we talked about last week, I guess the weird thing is I don't have anything to say about it, but really, what the hell is up with the Chiefs, man? What's
Yeah,
up with these guys?
the only thing I jotted down in terms of like in depth and whatnot was in the first quarter the Chargers get hit with a holding penalty, and then they end up in like a 2nd and 29 situation, and then they proceed to run the ball for 4 yards the next two plays. So it's just J.K. Dobbins like, yeah, we're just gonna run a stretch play real quick, and it felt legitimately insane to watch.
So you talked about bad play calling or bad coaches. We're talking about bad play calling now. And then I look at Greg Roman, who does good work 80% of the time, but then the 20% is like, what the actual fuck? And it's stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why the Ravens played that way for a long time.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, that's why Lamar Jackson never really scratched the hump. Now, I mean, it's probably a different issue, but the vibe is there where it's just like, all right, like, are you gonna do something a little more ambitious? Like you see where you are in the field.
I wrote down one stat for this game. Patrick Mahomes averaged 6.6 air yards per attempt in week 4. That's his most in a game this season. Most. And I'd like to point out that Rashee Rice it was confirmed to have torn his ACL. So, and Hollywood Brown is still on IR, I
Yeah,
believe. So that leaves them working with a
Xavier
skill group of
Worthy.
Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, and at tight end Travis Kelsey and Noah Gray. Who, yeah,
and,
it's a
and Kareem Hunt in the backfield.
Kareem Hunt looked
Fine.
fine against a very flaccid Chargers defense who were not bad but also not very good. This was definitely a somewhat deflated game for Chargers, who again last week felt like they're kind of coming back down from their early season high.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I had more to say. But yeah, the Chiefs are 4-0, and yet it just feels really weird with them. Really weird bunch of guys they got going over there. It's another weird game. Uh, the Las Vegas Raiders pulled out another good win for them over the Cleveland Browns. They won 20-16.
Yeah.
I'll let you start here.
I watched a lot of it, and really, I couldn't help but laugh at a lot of it because the offensive linemen clearly do not give a shit about whether or not Deshaun Watson lives or dies on that football field. Um, there was a play towards the end of the first half where Deshaun Watson like freaks the fuck out after one of the plays of one of the offensive linemen, and the offensive lineman basically like shoulder bumps him a little bit, and then Jameis Winston has to run over on the sideline to try and like calm him down and shit, because clearly Jameis Winston is the only person of reason within that sideline. And then Deshaun Watson shows up later and tries to talk to the offensive lineman again, but in a much calmer demeanor, and the offensive lineman is just looking the other way, just like, yep, mm-hmm. I could tell that he was not registering whatever the fuck he was trying to communicate with him, because nobody gives a fuck about Deshaun Watson. And to be fair, he didn't look great this game either. There was a few times where, he finally gets his shoulder back into place, where he's finally doing those deep balls that you expect from him. But then he's doing a whole bunch of these ugly ass flats that you come to expect nowadays.
I said it last week, and I wrote the same thing down this week. I don't know. I feel like for me, the jig is up, man. I wrote down two stats for Watson. This is on the season so far after 4 games. He is 31st in total EPA. He's at negative 51.5. The only quarterback behind him is Bo Nix. EPA per dropback, he's a negative 0.28 per dropback. That is 29th. The only quarterbacks behind him are Bo Nix, Will Levis, and Bryce Young.
Yeah.
The one stat I will put in there for parity is benefit of the doubt, as we mentioned, is he is being pressured the third most in the league, 40.1%, which again, benefit of the doubt. But
nah,
I don't know. At this point, it feels like organizational malpractice. Like,
yeah,
I'd say this is a two-way street, but it's mostly on his part of the sidewalk. Like, I don't think Kevin Stefanski and Ken Dorsey have done enough to kind of help him, and whether that's changing the game for him, like, I don't know if it feels insane to say about a guy who's getting paid this much, but like, yeah, I don't know if you start working like quick game, like, or I don't know if trading for Jerry Judy, who's been pretty good, was like the right move. Amari Cooper hasn't been great this season so far either. I don't know. To me, it's very clear, like very, very clear at this point that Watson is not going to be the player they traded for. Like, I have zero faith that that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, they feel like they have to write it out. When again, what is the point of you signing Jameis Winston if you didn't feel like you could put him out on the field?
You could put him out there, right? Yeah. Not all doom and gloom, I guess. I did see a good stat here on the Raiders side, actually. I brought up how their running back room has been really poor this season so far. They were actually really great running the ball outside of Zamir White. They got 6 runs that resulted in a gain of 10 or more yards on only 10 attempts, and one of them was a touchdown to DJ Turner. This one was actually really cool. They went no huddle and hit him on a jet sweep. And they got great lead blocks from Brock Bowers and Trey Turner near the sideline. So Luke Getsy is actually getting a lot out of this offense.
Yeah, I mean, Devontae was hurt too, and their primary target was Brock Bowers, so they had to make a lot of stuff, swing that way.
I think Jacoby Myers was the leading receiver for them this week. I didn't write his stats down, but I think he only had about 40, 50 yards. So. Moving on to more positive news, unless you were an Arizona Cardinals fan. The Washington Commanders absolutely slapped these dudes. Like, what happened in this game? The Commanders go into Arizona and they win 42-14. Like, this game,
I locked in big time for this one because I certainly could have said a lot about what Kingsbury and the rest of that offensive staff is doing.
Yeah,
because there is a lot of interesting stuff they're doing schematically with Jayden Daniels and whatnot. But really, what I was paying attention to was really how great Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. were on the defensive side of the ball. There's a whole bunch of like relative unknowns on that defense, and to be fair, their secondary wasn't like amazing, but they were really able to establish that pass rush with Darren Payne and Jonathan Allen on the D line,
Hmm.
and then they still had, even if he is a little washed, you still got Bobby Wagner on the linebacker side of things. So that, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that they're doing on that pass rush that made Kyler Murray make look the most uncomfortable he's looked all year.
Hmm. Yeah, this I I underrated how this Commanders defense isn't very good, but they are effective. I know that sounds funny to say, and I feel like that has to do with what mostly I have been talking about. Like offenses needing to be willing to take safe yardage, whether that's short, quick passes or establishing run game. And yeah, that's been difficult for teams against this Commanders defense because they're actually, again, they don't have any stand-ups or they don't have any standouts behind Payne and Allen. But yeah, you've got Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu at linebacker, and then you've got Jeremy Chin, who they also signed in the offseason at safety. And those are three guys who are really great at getting downhill, and they don't get you anything in the backfield. But yeah, right at the line of scrimmage or in the box, like they're gonna take guys down.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the big thing, and I noticed like James Conner had a pretty solid game,
he still
especially
had a
within that.
pretty good game. Yes.
Yeah, and that's really what I took away. Like, if anything, the Cardinals were better on the run game than they were when they tried to drop back with Kyler Murray. It was that pass rush over the actual run game itself, which says a lot.
Jayden Daniels again. Uh,
That boy
I
nice.
that
That
he's
boy nice.
he's 2024's poster boy for it. That boy nice.
Yeah,
He finished 26 for 30, 233 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, and then he added 47 yards on 8 carries and a touchdown. Seven of those runs were on scrambles too.
yeah.
Like, yeah, he is not a project man. He's here to play, dude. The Commanders are 3-1, and they are first. Count it,
People,
first in the NFC East.
Yeah, what I also noticed is a lot of people's concern with Jaden Daniels was like, oh, he's gonna like get himself hurt or whatever. He's actually been playing like really
He's been very
safe,
good about it. Yeah,
yeah, he's not like taking these real stupid fucking runs. Which back to that C.J. Stroud game, there was a really stupid goal line run where C.J. Stroud just barrels into four fucking defenders like a moron. Jaden Daniels doesn't really do that. He kind of allows for the scheme to get him open and runs behind the block really well rather than eat a tackle.
there's another good boring stat for you, but this one is actually really impressive, especially for a guy who's only 4 games into his NFL career. Going back to the final minute of Week 2 versus the Giants, Jaden Daniels completed 35 straight passes under 15 air yards. 35 straight.
That boy, nice.
I gotta give credit to Cliff Kingsbury too, who I was very concerned
Yeah.
about when the Commanders hired him, because based on what we saw, especially the last 2 years of him and Kyler Murray in Arizona, um, yeah, I
He,
just gotta have credit
he's
because
he's not a head coach, man. That
he's clearly not a
again,
head coach. Yeah,
that sort of asserts what we were saying. Like, some people should probably stay comfortable within the offensive coordinator or within for the defensive guys. Spag isn't taking head coaching jobs. I'm sure he could fucking take one. I'm sure people will hire him, but he's totally fine just getting real freaky on the sideline while Andy Reid does most of the organizing.
yeah, I really liked how he's built this offense for Jaden Daniels. I think the short game success has been really crucial to his very early development, and then also Brian Robinson's been really great in that regard too. Like they've established a run, they do establish the run game really well. The Commanders' ceiling looks, I don't know where it is, honestly. I'm very impressed with this team so far. And on the Cardinals side, just because we've been so high on this team, I think it's now going as I expected it to go.
Yeah.
Like the offense is good, but it's clear that Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. are still kind of building a connection.
Hmm.
And the big takeaway from this game is they are clearly not built to play from behind. They did score first in this game, but then they went to the half down 17-7, and then the Commanders scored on their first drive of the second half, and then they led 27-7 at some point. Yeah, the Cardinals are just not good enough on either side of the ball to play a game like this.
Yeah, I mean, especially when, again, I think that Commanders defense did a lot. I think even if that Commanders defense was like
Commanders
average,
defense also had a really amazing game.
yeah, if a defense plays even remotely average against the Cardinals, I think they're viable to win anything. But once they face like this intense pressure, it was really jarring to see Murray look that uncomfortable.
hmm. Commanders defense, before we move on, did want to shout them out. They had 4 sacks and 10 pressures on only 27 Kyler Murray dropbacks. Durant
Mm-hmm.
Armstrong got 1.5 sacks. Yeah, pretty good day at the office for them. And I want to shout out Armstrong because he had 1.5, but also he was doing it against Kelvin Beachum on the left side. So, yeah, really great game for Washington. And they've now, feel like every week we've had a new team we need to start paying more attention to. And I think Commanders have firmly made themselves public enemy or public darling number one, regardless, depending on how you feel about this. Okay, we've got 2 more games to talk about. This one, I know we are going to talk about this one at length later, but San Francisco 49ers handled a very lowly New England Patriots team, 30-13. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. I know we're going to talk about him later in 4 downs, but there's one headline from this game, and it's that Brock Purdy has just pushed himself into the MVP race.
That boy's nice.
I'm gonna put my hand to God. I didn't think he was a bad quarterback. I definitely thought he had an observable ceiling. And
Yeah,
4 weeks into this season, he is very clearly one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league right now.
I
Kind of
feel I,
insane.
I feel good being wrong about him because he
Yeah,
did,
right. You actually feel really good being wrong about him.
yeah,
Because
because I mean,
just for context, because I think again he was a rookie. He quite literally got just pushed into this team by several quarterback injuries, and he kind of looked not like a raw talent, but kind of like a gunslinger who was succeeding off the back of the talent in front of him. And now the pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, and now it's him who is clearly elevating this team,
yeah, I mean,
especially with the injuries they have.
I'll dig more into it later, but he's not nearly as robotic as he
As
once
we thought he
was.
was. Yeah.
Really, my big takeaway from this game, just a couple instances, that I was looking at. Ramondre Stevenson has fumbled every single game so far this season at least once. Um, I feel so bad for Jacoby Brissett. I feel so fucking bad for him because there's literally no good option on offense. You can't run the ball. You can't pass the fucking ball. Again, that's a team that's primed for check down material. Give me a little flat and give me some safe yardage. Drake May should be very grateful that they did not set his ass up like that. There was a
Has
third and one. There was this 3rd and 1 situation where the Patriots try and rush the play to try and catch the Niners in a penalty subbing situation, and that sort of it worked out. But that sort of let me know the kind of ways that the Patriots were willing to try and win this damn ball game.
yeah. Thank God Drake May is not playing football right now.
I feel that he should be
No.
very like if Jacoby Brissett gets hurt, that man's gonna be like, God damn, what the fuck are you? What do y'all got me playing with? Again, this man fumbled. Ramondre Stevenson fumbled every fucking game. This man's on a full ass streak, and I don't think it's gonna stop.
Um, Stevenson's like he's like the worst good running back in the league, or one of the best like not. I don't know.
No, that man
Running backs in
is
this league are.
maybe the worst starting running back in the league, and it
Whoa, whoa,
feels
whoa, whoa,
insane
whoa,
that,
whoa! See, you
and it
don't even
feels
listen
ins-
to me. The Raiders exist, man. Come on, why don't you ever listen to me?
he's
The Raiders
nah,
literally
he's
exist.
worse. He's worse.
God, dude. I've watched the Raiders play football, man. I can tell you that Zamir White is not a starting running back.
He's
I'll tell you that.
he's not great either, but like
I'd
Ramondre
rather
Stevenson
I
is
will say
that
this on
good.
the record. I'd rather watch Ramondre Stevenson have a fumble and 80 yards than have to watch Zamir White run for 40 yards on 15 carries ever again. Jesus. Um, I have a pretty good stat for you just because I don't think you would have this one down. Uh, Dak Prescott is second in the league in intermediate passes. That's 10 to 19 air yards a season. He's completed 15 of them. Brock Purdy's first. He's got 24. Like, yeah, Purdy, man. He's opened up his game. Yeah, he's taken the next step. Yeah, we got one more game to talk about, and this one that would be much more exciting. It turned out to be, well, if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan, this was an exciting one, winning 35 to 10 over the Buffalo Bills. Um, yeah, really underwhelming game in which this was definitely more the Ravens finally imposed themselves on a game physically, and the Bills just didn't have an answer for it.
Buffalo was due for it.
Yeah,
Buffalo
but
was due for a loss like this, and Baltimore, Lord knows they needed this because they didn't even feel good about winning against Dallas because they barely
they
squeaked
barely held
away
on
with
to
that
it.
one.
Yeah,
Hopefully that this transfers within their divisional game against Cincinnati next week. I think that was my big thought. Was like, all
mm,
right, like how does this affect the next few games afterwards?
yeah. Um, I was hoping my brain would refresh in that second I took the think, but yeah, this was really Bills came back down to earth. Like I think the Bills are still clearly one of the best teams in the league. And
Mm-hmm.
the Ravens, although there was the Ravens also pulling themselves back up, like, yes, we are better than what the first 3 weeks have shown. Um, Kyle Van Noy had a really great game here for this defense. They really needed a breakout game from one of their, we brought up how we talked about concerns with their defense post Mike McDonald and letting go of Patrick Queen.
Yeah,
He had 2 pressures and a sack on 11 matchups against Spencer Brown, who had allowed 0 pressures on 85 pass blocking snaps in the first 3 games. So he came up really clutch for them. Um,
it's always real bad in the second half with Baltimore too. Like I think
yeah,
within the
like
first half, they always establish well, and then the second half they always get like sloppy unnecessarily.
whether it's the other team makes an adjustment or Ravens aren't as physically like locked into the game. Yeah. I do have some stats though that I still have questions about Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. And it feels
Okay,
insane to say this about a guy who was a two-time MVP,
okay,
but I just want to be consistent because we've talked about teams, especially especially with talking about the Vikings and the Texans, concerns about what teams will look like in the playoffs in high pressure situations. For the second consecutive week, Lamar Jackson did not attempt a tight window pass, like at all. Didn't try
yeah,
once. 13 of his 18 pass attempts in this game came on targets with 3+ yards of separation. Granted, like he was great. He found when guys were open, he went 12 for 13, 144 yards in both of his touchdowns.
yeah,
He's targeted open receivers on a career high 58% of his targets now, which is, you know, to be clear, that is good. You should be hitting guys when they're open, but we've talked about the talent on this team. Isaiah Likely, for what it's, we talked about how Mark Andrews is very clearly declining very fast. Isaiah Likely, I think, has stepped into the tight end role like that is firmly his. I don't know what the numbers look like, but I'm willing to say he's probably top 5 in the league right now for sure. Rashad Bateman's been better than expected. Like maybe it's like a second year bump, like more chemistry in this offense.
hmm
But I don't know, especially based on how their recent playoff runs have ended. The Ravens, I mean, given how they're playing so far this season, I similarly just don't have faith that this kind of offense will barrel through teams in the playoffs the way that playoff offenses need to.
yeah,
And I'm just going to double down on this on the other side, the team they quite literally just smashed. That's exactly what the Bills are, which is why I'm so high on them because I have more faith that the Bills, Josh Allen and the Bills will come through in a playoff game for me than Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And I'll go all in. I'll push all my chips in based on 4 weeks, even the Chiefs.
So
Yeah.
I don't disagree, and I think it showed itself in really subtle ways because Lamar was still doing that thing where before a play even like begins to set for a second where he can even think about throwing, he'll immediately burst into a rush. And it's the most frustrating shit every time I watch it, where it's like, 2 seconds before a play even unfolds, before a receiver can even make a difference in their route, he's already taken off running. And I'm just like, all right, like, why the fuck does he keep doing that? And then he'll have a play where like he has the most gorgeous throw you've ever seen in your life. And I'm just like, why can't this guy be like that all the time? You could play some of it on his O line where, he feels like he's kind of forced to run the ball, but a lot of it is within his own instincts too. Like before the O line even collapses, he's thinking about running. And I don't know, it feels kind of rough. Whereas conversely, there was a couple throws uh, from Josh Allen, like he was going to the right side of the football and he throws a cross body where he almost completes it for a touchdown. Ridiculous, keeping the play alive in a way that uh
Oh
you
yeah, the
know
one where he almost steps out of bounds, right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, legit
Hmm.
nuts. I think there was like two or three defenders running at him. I was like, that's nuts. And Lamar is more than capable of doing something
Of
like that,
doing
but
that,
he
yeah.
doesn't. He sort of opts for these like safe runs because he trusts his own legs more than he trusts other people when he throws the football.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a funny abstract thing, but I feel like I am higher on the bill. Like Josh Allen is objectively a top five. I mean, I think he's a top three quarterback in this league. But I think he also is inherently elevated because he operates in one of the only offenses that will just let him slash is willing to
Yeah,
even let him do these kind of things. And similarly, and so on the flip side, yeah, you look at Lamar Jackson in this Todd Monken offense, who at times looked a lot more dynamic last year. But yeah, 4 games in the season, they've gone back to the. It's not exactly like Greg Roman, like relying on power run game, but yeah, it feels very safe.
it doesn't feel great, but I also feel a little crazy because I'll watch the dialogue online where people still think that Lamar could weasel his way into the MVP discussion again, and I'm just like, I don't know if we're watching the same game.
Right, and that brings us to the end of every game that was played on NFL Sunday. Um, yeah, what a weird week. I feel like I've been saying that every week, but this one really felt like we. I think because we're getting into the season and now the battle lines are starting to get drawn for teams with realistic playoff chances, and those even if they're only 2-2 or 1-3, that feel like they're going to be clawing to stay in it. All right, all right, let's get into it. Let's get into four downs. I'd like to start. I didn't do my homework this week. I only got one, and it's funny. I've already shouted him out before, but I'm going to shout him out again. Going back to Green Bay, going back to one of my favorite guys, Jayden Reed. Man, he's also prime. That boy, nice. He has been really great this season for the Packers. 7 catches on 8 targets, 139 yards, 1 touchdown, and 46 yards after the catch. I wish I wasn't so lazy. I would put up his next gen chart right here in between us because his chart looks so awesome. Like he hit every part of the field in this game. He's got 2 couches outside the numbers on the left, 2 outside on the right. He's got one, I think, on the right seam, like in a short hook. He's got one up the middle in the seam, like leaning right. He's got one like high post. Like yeah, this is he had a really fun game. And the Packers aren't anywhere close without him because they forced the ball a lot to Dontavian Wicks in this game. He only caught like half his targets, but Reed really kept them in this one. All right, who do you got for your downs this week?
So I'll briefly mention. I've got like two quicker ones, and then I've got obviously we talked a little more about it than I thought we would.
Let's go
Um,
quick then. Yeah, who do you got?
yeah, the first one I think is Darnell Mooney again. Great game from
Hmm.
him. 3 receptions, 56 yards, about almost 19 yards a catch. Which again, he's really good on those 50-50 balls, and he's also great on the yards after catch. I also noticed on the flip side of the ball, a strong reason why the Saints almost pulled it out in the end if it wasn't for that kick at the that 58 yarder from on the Atlanta side. Paulson Adebo,
Hmm.
um, 12 tackles, 3 pass deflections, one of them that was
Mm.
crucial at the end of the game, and then one pick. I mean, the Saints secondary didn't look amazing, but he was all over the fucking field that game. And the last one, obviously, Brock Purdy. I put very Aaron Rodgers esque, which felt very
Mm.
strong, but
Mm.
it felt right when I revisited the footage for it. I mean, he dropped like 3 touchdowns in one drive, and two of them obviously got broken up due to penalties. But the fact that that man could just like throw me 3 touchdowns within like 4 minutes feels kind of insane. And my biggest criticism was that it didn't seem like he had any agency when he was behind center. And
Hmm.
this really just opened my eyes to how, dynamic he can be.
Sorry, I'm looking up air yards per attempt. So number one in the league, I think you could take a wild guess. It's Anthony Richardson. He's averaging 12.6.
Best
um,
quarterback in the league, obviously.
but right behind him, number two, Brock
Brock
Purdy,
Purdy, that
10.7 per
yeah.
attempt. Like,
And
yeah, man.
I don't think he was doing this with like Ayuk as like one of his strongest receivers. I mean, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, once again,
even
Jawan Jennings is
even though
taking
they
that
let up
role
30
for a little bit.
points, you
Yeah.
can't really shout at the Patriots defense. Christian Gonzalez actually had a solid game when he was covering Ayuk, I remember.
Hmm.
Um, I think what was it? Ayuk just actually I did write this down. Ayuk only had one catch for 10 yards when he was covered by Gonzalez.
Hmm.
Um, Pretty good for a guy who's still hasn't played a full season of football, like going up against one of the highest paid receivers in the league.
Yeah. So he had 138 yarder, and then the other one was like 5. So that
Hmm.
adds up. And then, like, yeah, he's just spreading the wealth. And I think Jawan Jennings kind of makes Ayuk a little expendable, which is a little funny because
Brock.
they do roughly the same function. Where like Debo is like the Swiss Army knife, route running type of guy where you could do anything with him. And usually Ayuk was big for like those big plays, and he can open up the field in that way. Jawan Jennings is kind of doing a lot of the same there.
49ers leading the NFC West as we expected, led by Brock Purdy, Juwan Jennings, and Jordan Mason, as we expected. All right. Uh, thanks to Caleb, we did get all four downs in this week. That brings us near to the end, to the 2 minute warning. I want to let you go first. What game should we be watching next week?
Oh man, so I was wondering if we had the same one because then I was gonna pivot, but I had the Bills and the Texans. Sort
I
of
thought about it, but
similar sort of reasons that I had for the Ravens and the Bills, where I kind of want to see how Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson play up against Josh Allen, how they
mhm.
enforce that pressure the same way that Baltimore did, and it would be interesting to see if Josh Allen's you know able to overcome that, or if Houston is able to really put the dominance back on display.
Yeah, it's a really good matchup because then the Texans, especially because they have been so great, their defensive line getting pressures. Uh, with Josh Allen, then if you try to go around the edge on him, then he steps up. If you try to go
Mhm.
inside and they set that like the offensive line stays in front of him, then he's gonna roll out, and obviously then he's a scramble threat. So this will be a really interesting game to watch for both sides. That's actually not the game I had though.
Okay.
Um, I thought about it, but I honestly felt like you would pick that, and it was consistent with what we've been picking the past few weeks. I
Yeah.
had a funny choice actually.
Oh, okay.
I went with the Jets Vikings. So it's funny because I
Okay.
didn't realize this before I picked it, but it's actually the London game
Yeah.
this season, are one of the two London games this season. So it's the international games always get really weird, but
Yeah.
this one, I wrote a headline for this one. This is for the Jets and the Vikings. It's the prince who was promised versus the prince who is question mark.
Oh
I'll let you
wow.
I'll let
I
you
know.
figure out who
I
you
know.
think is
I
who
know
in
what
that
the,
metaphor.
I know what the fuck you do. That's messed up. Might blame it on the
um,
Jet. Might still blame it on the Jets too. See,
um,
my secondary as like a backup just in case. I was actually gonna see how nasty the Saints and the Chiefs could get.
I actually thought about that one too.
It's a real nasty type of game because like Derek Carr could theoretically air out against the Chiefs if he wanted to, and I think that would be a very fun game if Derek Carr went head to head over the top with Mahomes. Now looking at it just based off of those last two games that they had, I think it'll probably be a lot of game management from Mahomes, and really it's
Mm.
just going to be dependent on whether or not Derek Carr
The Saints
can
offense actually
be
blows
can
the top off. Yeah.
yeah.
I did have one question for Jets Vikings. It was can the Vikings line hold up against this Jets pass rush, who I had
Okay.
concerns about early on in the season, and so it's very plausible that this line will rely on very hot performances from Will McDonald, which isn't, I guess, the absolute worst thing to rely on. But yeah, good international game because I know the I don't know why I can remember this, but I know the Germany game, which I think happens in week 8 or 9, is absolutely disgusting. It's Giants Panthers for the record.
I know if
Punishment for World
anything,
War II, if you haven't heard. It's like their
there.
last reparation for the world. Someone had to host it, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it could have been worse. They could still be watching Bryce Young play quarterback.
It's
Another
true.
shout
Yeah, now they get to watch Andy Dalton.
out.
You ever thought you'd be excited to say that? Get to watch Andy Dalton.
Now they're finally going to be excited for a football game. Instead, they were like dreading it. They were like, "Can we get the small one off the football field?"
I was really hoping you would do a German accent, but maybe don't do that.
I thought about it for a second. I was like, for half a second when I said small, I was like, I could
The
easily go
small
Juan
one.
right there. And go Juan right there.
All right. Um, oh man, yeah. What a weird week of football. Like seriously weird. I feel like I'm just gonna say that every week for until like maybe week 9 or 10, but this one really felt like what the hell
This
happened?
one, this one felt more normal to me when I looked at the slate of games for next week. That's when I was like, oh, this might be kind of nasty.
All right. Um, you never answered my question technically, which is like, yeah, if you were an NCAA athlete like you, and you had to take one NIL deal, like company, whatever, restaurant, yeah, who would you want to pitch you?
Um, Considering I'm in Texas and I'm right next to the University of Texas, plenty of people take the very obvious one with HEB. I would like to be sponsored by Bucky's.
It's a good one. Mm,
I
it's a
like
good
to,
one.
I'd like commercials where I'm next to the beaver
Next to
mascot.
Bucky.
Yeah, next to Bucky munching on the beaver nuggets. I think that would be ideal, at least considering for where I'm at anyway. I think if I was on the West, I think I'd probably go with something a bit more glamorous. Be like, oh yeah, love to go with Nike and whatnot. But nah, Texas Bucky's is right.
Obviously, mine is Raising Canes. So
We're not gonna do this every time we end. We're not gonna end with this Canes propaganda all the time.
We are this week, though. Yeah, that's it for us this week. Thank you to everybody who listens to us. The usual, wherever and whenever you're listening. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night. We will see you next week.